The tragic circumstances surrounding the death of John Kivela serve as a reminder that lives can spin out of control and despair can be too hard to live with. But this program is not about that.
That man just effused his enthusiasm for the UP everywhere we went in Lansing.
And he went from being an auto mechanic to being a commissioner and a mayor and then our representative, and I really think that the people down there recognize that in him.
Well, he thought he could just like stir every single pot at once.
John was able to bring this down to a real personal level in his dealing with the other lawmakers, and I think that really made a difference.
It's amazing what you can get accomplished, and John really led the pack with that.
In the next half hour, we're going to remember John Kivela, not for how he left us, but for how he served us. This remarkable man took his desire to get things done from the local Market City Zoning Board to state government in Lansing.
It was really amazing to watch a person grow, and John was a very intelligent man.
And all of the causes that he was going to fight for, he was so passionate for it.
That was what John did, so his legacy is more than any legislation he did. It was how he truly tried to impact the daily lives of his residents.
For us, what we saw is he wanted to do everything for everybody, especially his family. He wanted to take care of all the chores. He wanted to do all the cooking. He wanted to take care of all the household things. And he also wanted to take care of everybody and everything else in the state in general.
We did everything together. My dad was like this master cook, cleaner, everything, but the weekends were so valuable to us, especially when my brother and I were in school and my parents worked. And Sundays were a really big deal to us in the house. My dad would wake up and make this huge breakfast.
He just cooked with love. That's the things that we miss. He wanted to have cookouts and his friends over, and he had just the biggest heart.
And I remember when he joined the Zoning Board of Appeals, it just changed a little bit because instead of him being so interested in just like reading the paper, he had one more thing on top of his normal day job as a mechanic to start caring about. And instead of just sitting around on Sundays, it would be we'd sit around and have breakfast and then we'd start like the first adventure. And I didn't really know what we were doing, but we'd get in the car and we'd drive somewhere. And it'd be someone's house, and I'm like, this isn't a friend, this isn't a family, why are we looking at their fence?
And then not too much after, he was, running that board, and it became very clear that he was very good at it.
We drove down, I think it was Fair Avenue one day, and our job was to count every single house that faced Fair Avenue. And it was because they were considering changing the name for some reason, just on one little stretch. And instead of just saying like, oh yeah, we're gonna memorialize this road, that sounds good, and just vote yes, he took his family on a drive to say, count every single house that faces this street. Because if we change the name of this street, all of those people are gonna have to change their mailing address and their home address. And I just thought, and I was young, but I thought that's just something I might not think about. If someone said, let's memorialize this person, it might be easy to just say yes. And instead, he wasn't thinking about that easy vote. He was thinking about all the people who lived in those houses.
And then again, there's an auto mechanic that's running the city commission meeting.
There was some discussion about running for the city commission, and it was like, holy cow, this is changing our lives completely from the way we ran our lives before.
Police officers would come once a week and drop a big packet off. And again, just how thorough he was and how much he really cared on these issues.
But I felt like he's so good at this. He should, why hold him back? He should have this opportunity. And then it became very clear that he was such a good commissioner.
And my dad would sit in a lazy boy in the basement and like read one of these thick packets start to finish and really devour it. Instead of skimming or whatever, he took everything so seriously.
I think John was an excellent city commissioner. Well, one of the aspects about John that people may not realize is, I mean, he's really was a good listener, and John talked to people, and he was just like everybody else. I mean, and John wanted to do it, I think, for all the right reasons. John wanted to be involved because he felt he could make a difference.
And John was always very encouraging, very helpful, and would bridge any gaps. If he saw that there was something that was coming that might not work out the best, he would be a front runner in making sure that it could be fixed before it became a problem.
Very good with communications, relationships. He loved people.
John was very good at making sure that all the commissioners had an opportunity to talk about their concerns and to put forth their ideas on an issue, and then kind of bring it all together and give people the chance to make a decision. And often it led to kind of consensus decision making.
John had a skill set that I really admire that I've also tried working on in myself once I started seeing how valuable it is, and that's the ability to really listen to all parties and try and find a solution that works for everybody. That's something you don't always see in elected politics, and he was fairly strong-willed on what he wanted to see happen, but he usually reserved his judgment until he had the chance to talk to everybody.
John just knew everybody, and he had a lot of credibility with those folks because of his time in Marquette. And so he was really somebody that they would talk to very quickly and felt like they could immediately understand their issues.
Coming out of local government, he could see it, and he was good at articulating it and helping people to understand just how important it is. When we make decisions in Lansing, they have impacts on our local units of government.
And I remember him talking to us, I mean, in this living room, sitting down one morning, and it was like this big gulp, like, I really want to talk to you guys about something, it's really big.
That decision was very scary for us as a family, but again, it was the same thing. We just felt like you were able to do all of this, and we're just, you know, seeing what we always believed in him and always saw, that you could really go to Lansing and you could really make a difference.
But it was just an easy, like, but you have to do it. Like, this is what you're meant to do.
He told me that he was thinking about running for representative, and I thought he'd be a good choice, and as it turns out, he was.
We were in Lansing, and so anyways, we're having lunch, and he says, there's going to be a work session at the Capitol at 1 o'clock. He said, let's go there and watch them, how they do it. That's when John got the bug. He loved it. Well, we were standing up there, and he really enjoyed it. And so anyways, on our way back, as we're going down the highway, he says, that was pretty cool, wasn't it? And I said, yes. It was a while before he really started telling me, you know, I'm going to run for that 109th.
You know, I remember talking to him after some of the commission meetings where he said, yeah, I'm going to run. You know, it's the logical next step. I really love community service. This is where I want to go with it.
Would I have your support, and do you think that this would be a good decision for me? And I did support John, and I do believe that it was a good decision for him and more importantly for our district.
Let's face it, how many people out in Lansing took a limo ride with the President of the United States too, so that's kind of unique for John as well.
After that point, I remember being heavily involved in the conversations because at the time, I had just finished up the job as a roofer and I was looking for work, and he took me on as a campaign manager.
But I didn't realize it would be like so hard for him to win that first election. In my head, I'm like, oh, he's the mayor of Marquette. He's so likable. At least everywhere I go, people really like him.
How you doing, John? Thanks, Tommy. Thank you very much, sir.
He wasn't the favored candidate. So there was a lot of dialogue about how do we reach out to everybody? How do we make sure that they know who John is and that they feel comfortable with him despite what other forces were saying?
I made thousands of phone calls and knocked on probably almost 1,000 doors, some with my dad, some not. all over the 4 counties. I mean, I was in Newberry and Ishpeming and Manistee.
I can't remember how many doors we knocked, and I think every candidate is going to say that, but we probably doubled what any other candidate has walked, just because we knew that it was an uphill battle.
You know, it's a campaign, so things happen and people say things, and it's so heartbreaking, and he was the one that was strong, or, you know, this is a campaign. And
he won by such a narrow margin in the primary that I think everything that was done was key to being done. And so 2 things. One, he reached out with the Finnish community with Sisu, and he put the blue Sisu stickers on all of his signs. And I think that helped a lot because everybody knew a Kivela, even if it wasn't the same family. Everybody knew a Kivela.
And that's what he did, just one person at a time. He knocked these people over and just told them like why, or would ask them like, what is important to you? Like, what do you do for work? And what is important for you and like your state legislator? And then he was like, okay, like I'm gonna take that into consideration.
The other thing that he did that I thought was really strategic on a lot of levels, Democrats might not totally like it, but he reached out to the Republicans a lot. He went on conservative talk radio shows. He met with conservative groups all over all 4 counties. And he basically, in the primary, was starting to say, look, more than likely the seat has always gone to a Democrat. I want to start getting to know you now.
He really wanted to partner up with me, and at one of the forums we were at, even, he kind of stepped in a little bit with the party folks when he said how much he looked forward to getting to Lansing and working with me instead of the person I was running against.
then when he became the state rep, and he just hit the ground running and just took on everything.
He came down gung-ho and, really went to work right away. There was really no transition period. He kind of was goal-oriented and boom, he kind of went right at it.
Yeah, he came in with some big bill ideas that he felt he needed to work on right away.
It was like he walked in the office and he was like, this is what I expect from you and this is what I want to accomplish. Like, this is what I want to accomplish. Boom, 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 boom. And he's like, if you want to continue to work in this office and work with me, like, we're going to get this done together. And I remember Craig just being like, I've never been so excited, because I was willing to, like, okay, a new guy's here, I'm going to sit back. And I was like, heck no, that's not what we're going to do.
So he came in moving right away. He was working to build relationships. One of those was going to be trying to really create a UP caucus with the other members from the UP. And those were Democrats and Republicans. They felt that needed to be a strong voice to work together. So that was his goal, and that's what he did.
It was really John that pulled together the UP representatives and made a UP caucus of sorts. He was the one who kept pushing everybody, we got to stand together, we got to stand together.
He was the catalyst, really, I think, that brought the UP team together, that people got so familiar with seeing.
And he reached out to them right away, and he had to convince the other side of the party to come on over, we're from the UP. We got to work together. And that was the first time they heard that.
Started where the 4 of us really worked together quite well with Representative McBroom, Representative Deanda, certainly John and myself. And it was John that invited all of us over for a spaghetti dinner. And that was right after we all got down to Lansing. I remember that dinner like it was yesterday.
And it may have gone against party lines in some cases, but if it was right for the UP, they all worked together. I don't think even Governor Schneider had said he hasn't seen a group of people work together bipartisanly as well as the people in the Upper Peninsula. And I think a lot of that's related to John Kivela.
If you take a look at John's accomplishments, the number of bills that he got through early on in his time down there was really phenomenal when you consider that they were in the minority.
One of the problems that the UP is facing is illegal meth. So our first bill was going to combat that.
I knew this was the first issue that I wanted to tackle, because we're seeing this in our court systems. We're seeing, houses burning, people being burned, families being torn apart, lives being lost. It is a devastating, highly, highly addictive drug.
The meth thing, I said to him, I said, John, what the heck are you thinking? You're going to take on the drug business right off the bat? You know, couldn't you have gone another direction? Well, that's what needs to be taken care of right now, he said.
He was passionate about fighting that stuff, and you know, he looked at how people were getting the drugs, the supplies to manufacture it, and if we could cramp that down, kink down on the collection of the materials. He called it smurfing.
John got an opportunity to go up, I believe, in a helicopter with the state police when they were surveilling people that were doing these type of things, the smurfing thing that they're talking about, where they go from one store to the next store because they can't buy enough of it in one store without getting captured, so they go around and buy it all over, and they actually track people doing it. And so when John got to see it, that helped him when he went down to Lansing to put together what he needed to put together to give the tools to the police to actually deal with it and go after people that were doing this kind of stuff, and work with the local community and the businesses to identify it.
He connected with pharmacists and people who had been in trouble for buying too much Sudafed, who legitimately had, you know, nasal issues or sinus issues, and would sit down with them and say, like, I want my legislation to protect meth, but I don't want it to hurt people like you who legitimately need these medications.
And so John had a bill to just limit your amount of purchase to just a little bit more than what you could even safely take anyway. And if you needed more than that, you'd have to have a prescription.
Well, I think he worked well with the economic development because there again, being a former business owner or representative of a business, he knew that.
There was a case where Marquette and Escanaba came together and formed an alliance and put something together that was quite unique, and it kind of fit perfect for John and I to come together and kind of bring that message back to Lansing, which we did.
And he was so proud of that work, and then it was a little tough to get it rolling and get all the pieces to fit together, and you try to keep the communities all at the table rather than taking their marbles and going home. And the UP just really has risen to the occasion, as we all expected it would.
Chronic wasting, that was a bill that was brought to us by a constituent he's very active in outdoors. He's a member of the MUCC, and he came to John and said, I think we need to look into preventing the spread of chronic wasting into Michigan.
Because of our border, it makes it very unique to Michigan and the Upper Peninsula, and that's why John fit it quite well. And there was measures that are needed to be taken to protect us from the chronic wasting.
How can we prevent this disease from getting here? It's a really overwhelming thought to think about what kind of damage it would do to our economy up here. And you know, different folks feel it has different value because some say it's inevitable, but John didn't feel that way. And so get those billboards up. Get some bills passed so it's clearly illegal to bring these things across the border.
I remember John coming in and saying that he called, it was Representative Walsh at the time who was spearheading that, John Walsh, and he told me, he said, I'm going to call him and say I want one of the bills. This was a large bill, and I looked at it and said, John, you know, we don't, helping Detroit's not always a favorite thing in the northern Michigan area or Upper Peninsula. And he said, no, I have to do it. This is going to be one of the most important things that happens this whole time in Michigan. We have to save Detroit. We have to save the pensioners.
John did it in a proactive approach. He'd come and talk to us about it, and he came and talked to me about it so that he didn't get an editorial where it's kicking him in the butt for doing such a thing. He wanted you to know why he was looking at what he was doing. He said it was just the right thing to do, the fair thing to do. If it was our people up here that needed the help, I would hope that they would do the same thing down in Detroit and not argue about it, but help us out too.
He wanted to get involved, but he wanted my opinion on what did I think as a fellow Uper. Was I going to be on board? What were we going to do?
There's a true connection between Detroit and the Upper Peninsula. And he was brave enough to see it. It was, again, he said, don't be afraid that I'm going to do this. I can sell this. I can make people understand that we need to protect those pensioners and the people of Detroit, because that's what we need to do. That's what statesmen would do.
And we just had a very open and frank conversation, and I was so excited that he wanted to be involved, and he asked me for the number for the speaker so he could call the speaker and say, I want in. And I gave him the number, and next thing I knew, the speaker was calling me. Can you believe John Kivela wants on board with this? And I'm like, isn't it great, And that brought John a lot of credibility with the speaker, and a lot of John's projects suddenly had a lot more ability to move forward because of how he was willing to work together with others.
You know, sometimes it's not a bill, sometimes it's working behind the scenes to make things happen for people.
One of John's accomplishments, I would say, was never legislatively. It was, he was contacted by some state employees with the Department of Health and Human Services that were having some issues with some supervision problems. Employee morale was really low. We were losing a lot of people, and John fought unbelievably hard to make sure their voices were heard.
You know, for the first time I noticed he was nervous, and he said, you know, I don't like this style of, you know, kind of doing it this way, but I feel this is the way it has to go because I'm going to help these people. And, you know, I feel that if Governor Snyder sees a headline, John Kivela calling out, you know, department, he would look into it and he would see the wrong.
And that's when he held the meeting on the front steps of the county building and courthouse and said,
the more serious thing to me is how these employees are treated, and the fact that these employees are caring for the most vulnerable in our community. These are primarily children, and you can't tell me that we haven't put children at risk with the short-staffed, overworked personnel in this department.
And they got action. John got action. When push came to shove, he got it.
The administration officials said, wow, something is really going on there, and eventually the problem got solved.
Through John's actions, the department was able to look in, see there was a problem, got a new supervisor. John had people calling him for days after in tears, thanking him for how, you know, day one, how much more they loved going to work.
Probably one of the things like I'm most proud of, and my family and I are actually going down to Lansing to accept award on his behalf, is because he has worked really hard on legislation for the Michigan Nurses Association on their Safe Patient Care Act. It's a package of bills that would just change the life of RNs. And I know I'm a registered nurse. My dad's mom was a registered nurse. Things he was so proud of. He watched me have a really hard time working in Michigan because of working a lot of mandated overtime and just being really stressed, feeling understaffed.
And that's just what John did. You know, he saw a problem, he saw people in need of help, and he was going to do it.
Basically how it works is a lot of hospitals and places fund other people's campaigns, and so it's hard for them to want to see a bill that could potentially cost them a lot of money. And so that's a threat to representatives. It makes them not want to put their name on it. And it made these representatives and senators kind of come out of the woodwork and say, no, if John is this passionate about it, this supportive of it, like, we're going to do something scary and help. So that's definitely the most, brings me the most pride, especially while I'm watching a lot of my coworkers in Michigan who are really suffering. And he took that to heart so much that he could help with that.
His ability to work with representatives from all over the state, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of ideas, he would work with everybody. It was really kind of incredible to see.
And he was determined to build trust on both sides, with the older Democrats and with all of them, young and old, in the Republican Party.
Worked with everybody to try to make things happen, and he would do everything that he could with every last ounce of energy he had to make it work.
I think he really was the type of politician that like young people are dreaming of right now, who just isn't afraid to do what's right, even if it's unpopular.
The final bill, sponsored by the late State Representative John Kivela, was signed into law today.
In his place, his family stood behind Governor Rick Snyder as he signed a law that will heighten penalties for illegally importing deer, elk, and moose carcasses to Michigan. It was an emotional day at the Capitol for the Kivela family as they visited the House floor.
He was passionate about the area, and he had his fingers on all of those things that were going on, and he loved the place, and it just showed all the time. So he was exciting to be with. He was fun to be with. And
I miss John. He was so good for Michigan and for the UP. And as I said on the Senate floor, my hope is that, you know, when it's such the opposite of what we see today. and especially Washington when you see what's going on out there.
Glad to see that he's got this plaque out on the bike path that I ride by all the time, and it says, always fight the good fight. I hope everybody, if they go by the plaque and it's right past the Carp River there on the way out towards the travel center off to the side, you'll see that plaque set up for John Kivela with that statement that always fight the good fight. And that's, I guess, what John should be remembered for, is always fight the good fight. And you fight it for the right reasons because you can make a difference.
I think that that's the legacy that really sticks out the most, especially as I get messages and talk to people who come and say, your dad would have never told you this, but this is what he helped do for me. And you know, I work in a coffee shop in Newberry and this is how your dad helped me. Or I'm a 19-year-old boy who's interested in maybe becoming a politician, and when I messaged your dad, I never expected to get a response, but he met me at 3rd Street Bagel one day and like really gave me faith in like my future. And it was like these little people one at a time, and as they share their stories, other people come up with stories. And I think that that's so much of his legacy, is just this person who, how did he have time to do it all? But just had this heart of gold and wanted to make a difference.